Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be discussing a quote made by RTD in the recently released Sunday Times that's caused a bit of a stir in the Doctor Who online community, specifically Twitter, in reference to new writers. We're going to be breaking down this comment and I'm going to do my best to break down what he actually meant by this. So as I said, the quote comes from the recent Sunday Times. Russell T Davies and Mark Gatiss were interviewed on how to save TV. And yes, I did pay £1 whole for the privilege of reading this article. So do me a favour, subscribe if you're new. There's actually some interesting details on Classic Who streaming and Doctor Who streaming in general, which I think I'll save for a separate video, as the contents of this video are probably different in tone to how I would like to discuss the future of classic Doctor Who streaming and, Doctor Who in general. But in terms of what Russell T Davies said that has caused a stir in the community, I took a screenshot of what was said in full so that we don't misinterpret anything that's being said here. And what about finding a new generation of TV writers? Davies thinks too many recent recruits are just too angry. I do a lot of mentoring, and there are voices wanting to be heard, of any gender or ethnicity who consider themselves invisible. They hate the media that ignores them, and they're trapped into wanting a job in that medium purely to increase representation. I read their scripts, and they're rubbish. They don't actually love television, so they don't know how to write for it. Now, on its face, I can see how this would come across as somewhat hostile towards new and upcoming writers and the ideas of representation. My personal opinion on this, personally, is whilst I understand why people view this as a harsh statement, I think it's fairly obvious what RTD is going for here. The idea that a desire to increase representation in media, which is a noble goal, does not inherently lead to good television. We've even seen examples of this. Velma, a show that seems to exist purely to hate on its own audience, has gone on to be one of the most critically lambasted shows of recent memory. So the way I see this is that whilst it might be harsh in some ways, it's not degrading new writers. It's not intending on discouraging new writers. It's just saying that representation alone isn't enough to make a good show. A sentiment which I do, at its heart, agree with. I do think there's a conversation to be had about why these writers are angry, why they feel dejected by the current media landscape, but I don't inherently disagree that there are some writers who get into the media creation business for reasons outside of telling a good story, even if those reasons are noble. The thing that I take issue with is people taking this quote and taking even fractions of this quote, because obviously this has been tweeted in, multi-paragraphs by people like Doctor Who Production News, which is fine, but obviously because of the way Twitter makes threads, certain bits get quote tweeted more than other bits, particularly the last bit about the scripts being rubbish, which comes across as a lot more inflammatory on its surface. But the issue I take with the way this is being discussed is that I'm already seeing it turned into RTD hates new writers, RTD speaks out against representation in media, which is just not what's happened. RTD, the guy who's made some of the most progressive works in the last decade, RTD, who faced criticism from the infamous Mary Whitehouse over queer as folk, RTD, the person who has directly called out the representation in things like Loki as lackluster. I do not think that this quote is him going on the offensive at representation. I think it is him saying that I want your voices to be heard. I want representation in my media, of course, but I also want you to be able to write good stories. And I think what he wants to do, as he even says, he mentors a few people, is bring out the good writing in them as well as these diverse stories, which should be told. That's how I see it. And make no mistake, I'm not being hostile towards anyone here, really. I just find that there is a pretty consistent cycle of RTD says something, as he is the current showrunner, that thing then gets condensed and reposted and retweeted and re-altered and said out loud in video form, as I'm doing now, I guess, to the point where it is simplified to a level that is not representative of the point that he was trying to make. For an example, I can see why people would have issues with the regeneration from the 13th Doctor to the 14th Doctor not featuring her outfit. However, I saw people making the quotes that RTD said, which I'm not going to read all those out, but you'll probably remember them, as him going on the offensive towards male cosplayers of the 13th Doctor, which very obviously, to me at least, was not the intention. And I guess what this video is just here to signify is that I think we should all be careful to read full quotes and understand full context before passing judgment. You can even disagree with me on this quote and RTD's stance and his position in the industry. That's perfectly fine. But at least now, in this video, you have the full quote, and hopefully I've contributed some way in giving full understanding and context to this quote, and whether you agree with me or disagree with me, we can have a thoughtful, condensed, mature conversation that I'm sure won't devolve into petty insults in the comment section. I appreciate that this is quite different from my usual content. I don't tend to be serious in videos, but to be honest, I feel like I had something to say here, and I wanted to say it, so I appreciate you all listening to me ramble on about this. I'll have a video out maybe tomorrow about the statements he's made on Classic Q streaming and stuff like that, as well as I have a theory video coming out, so if you want to watch that, be sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.